Welcome to the Mavericast. My name is Sam, here along with Pizza Party Andy.
Yo!
Steve. And you can't wave at the microphone. It doesn't record motion. And we have a special guest this week, Jeremy from the College Democrats.
Yeah.
So, Jeremy, what's your name, your year, your major, and your aspirations?
So I'm Jeremy Wang. I'm a sophomore here at Pitt. My major is biology, and currently on a pre-med track. Don't really know if that's what I want to do for sure, but leaning towards it. I'm also serving as the social media director for the Pitt Democrats here. So yeah.
You where would you put yourself on the political spectrum, would you say?
You know, honestly, I don't think there's just a one-word definition that I can assign, because I'm a mixed bag, and I think most people are. So the best way I can put it is I'm a liberal who's very, very, very pro-gun, is the best way I can put it.
So I do want to, before we get into our discussion today of Thanksgiving and the Second Amendment, because this is the Second Amendment Thanksgiving special Guns and Gravy. I probably won't be called that, but I do want to ask you a few questions about the election.
Okay.
And just what's been going on in politics recently. So you are a Democrat, and we're all Republicans here, and who have been on the podcast previously. So I want to ask you your opinion on the election, what you thought about the outcome. Were you surprised by any states?
And also, what the Democratic Party can do moving forward.
Okay. Okay, so I think this election was pretty interesting for both parties in that, if the Republicans lost, then there's going to be a major crisis. If the Democrats lost, in this case we did, that would prompt a lot of questions about how to move forward. And I think the 2016 election really brought some reality checks and wake-up calls for the Democratic Party. I think I would say I disagree with the Clinton campaign's assessment of what happened. I think there should be a lot more blame placed upon the DNC, the DNC leadership.
Absolutely.
You see a lot of people kind of protesting the concept of the Electoral College, calling it rigged. But I really think that betrays the original message, which was a lot of the same people were saying oh no, it's not rigged. Trump is just setting himself up for when he loses, he's gonna throw a fit. No, we can't just do an about face and then call it rigged because we lost.
Right.
I think if people really want to take a look at a rigged system, a system that actively worked against a candidate, I think an appropriate place to start looking is what the DNC did to Bernie Sanders.
Absolutely.
I will say that I wasn't a huge Bernie supporter. I liked him. I voted for him over Hillary. And I think that his populist tone really resonated this year, which was pretty critical. And I will say that I think Bernie could have beaten Trump.
I think so too.
I'm just very, very disappointed and angry at how the DNC has kind of treated him. And I think it also reveals a lot of questions about structuring leadership, superdelegates, right? Superdelegates, in my opinion, are inherently undemocratic. They operate independently of how voters like you and I do. They just kind of pick things. And I think we have to move past the point where the DNC is picking candidates for us.
Right.
We have to get to the point where we're picking candidates that the DNC will later support.
Right.
Because right now we're seeing the DNC trying to kill off, Democratic candidates in the primaries and spending so much money to do so. And then, go ahead.
I think a lot of it just had to do with just the sheer arrogance of Hillary Clinton and her. I don't want to say supporters, but her posse almost. They were her campaign slogan for a day, because they realized it was so horrible, was "It's her turn." And I think that alone just shows how confident they were, how arrogant they were, and they really screwed the Democrats, because I think it would have been a much more competitive election had Bernie been the Democratic nominee.
And I wasn't pro-Trump. the whole primary season, and I was
Cock.
and yeah, and I wasn't a big fan of him during the general election.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I have to give hats off to the RNC was that they let it happen.
Right.
They weren't actively. I mean, I felt they weren't actively trying to stop Trump or Cruz, who both they didn't like really either.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the candidate was called, I think they, for the most part, I think they begrudgingly supported their candidate for most of the election. I don't know if you have any.
And I think my hat really goes off to Reince. I think Reince did an excellent job managing what many other party chair people would essentially be a crisis in their own party, having an outsider sort of take it down. And I think Wasserman Schultz and Donna Brazil did the absolute opposite of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I really do think like American politics in general kind of needs to move past like this concept of like heavenly mandate. Like when Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton both announced that they were running, it was just people were already being like, oh yeah, it's going to be between them. And I don't think that's something that we should just go off of, right? Like just name, like brand recognition isn't good enough anymore.
So, to get off this depressing topic of Jeremy's party dying, let's talk about Thanksgiving for a bit. First thing I want to talk to you guys about is what do you guys like to do for Thanksgiving? What is your every year, like, Jeremy, like, I know you live in Texas, do you guys go out, ride some horses with some shotguns? Like, what do you do?
So, generally we go out for, like, a barbecue, and it's like a potluck. Pretty standard.
I hate you, because that's not what I do.
Jeez.
I hate you in the most compassionate way. Yeah, for me, it's more like we get together, my mom yells at me to set the table, and I don't, because I'm watching football all day. And then, or if it's at my grandma's house, I go and I just, like, watch football, and then they yell at me to eat dinner, and then I crawl under the table because I'm 3, and then I go watch more football.
Then you take the nap after dinner.
I take naps all the time. I mean, it's just normal. Some people are like, oh, he's taking a nap, and it's like, that's just, like, what he does.
That's just Sam.
Yeah. Andrew, what about you?
I hate to say pretty standard, but similar extended family gathering at a relative's house. Pretty standard dishes as far as it goes. I think it's one of my favorite days of the year. Actually, it is my favorite day of the year because I think it's so distinct from Christmas because it's not about the consumption. It's not about what you can give. It's about being with your family. It's about sharing the company. And just being thankful for what you have.
For me, it's all about the consumption. I love food. Pretty similar to Andrew, just the most stereotype Thanksgiving dinner you could imagine. That's it.
Nice.
Okay, so we actually do want to talk a little bit about the history of Thanksgiving. I'm not too knowledgeable about the history of Thanksgiving, but I know that Steve and Andrew have some stuff on that. So why don't you guys start?
One of the things that pisses me off every Thanksgiving is, on Facebook, every liberal and their mother, forgive me, Jeremy, but they're they share all the pictures all over Facebook. It's like, oh yeah, we're celebrating the genocide of a people, and I was like, that's so historically inaccurate. That's not what it was. The large scale, the loss of the Native American culture is one of the biggest tragedies that the world has ever faced. But I don't think it's fair to label the holiday as a celebration of genocide.
Fair. I think it's like appropriate to universally condemn like Columbus Day. Because, like, Christopher Columbus was, like, objectively a bad dude.
I agree with Jeremy on this one.
Because, he ran,
he was a slave trader.
He gave sex slaves to his colleagues. He chopped off people's hands for not giving him enough money.
And, of course, there are records of explorers reaching the New World, so to speak, well before him, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah, Leif Erikson, my boy.
I like just Columbus Day because that's a day off of school. So I mean, I'm pro.
Alright, okay.
I am the only pro Columbus Day person on this
Switch it
pod.
out for another name.
Yeah, Sam Day.
I know.
Can we celebrate Leif Erikson Day?
Oh yeah, sure.
Like we can pull a SpongeBob.
Some states have sort of switched over to having it as like a Native Peoples Day. I think that can almost be a universal thing to agree on.
Yeah.
And another, you have some other things about the history of Thanksgiving, and if you want to share that with us.
Absolutely. Just sort of start. George Washington on October 3rd, 1789, issued the sort of first declarance of Thanksgiving, meaning it to be a day of thanksgiving and prayer, in order to reflect on the new nation, reflect on its values, and reflect on what God had given them. Congress overwhelmingly supported Washington, but the holiday still didn't really become an official event. It was just kind of practiced colloquially. And that's because Thomas Jefferson felt that public demonstrations of piety shouldn't really be as plentiful as Washington wanted them to be. It was inappropriate given separation of church and state. But the proclamation was not issued by any president between 1815 and the day Lincoln had the opportunity to. And Lincoln did it to thank the Union Army and God for shifting the country's fortunes on the day in 1863. So the fourth Thursday of November remained the annual holiday from 1863 to 1939. But Franklin Roosevelt inherited a situation where there were 5 Thursdays in the month of November. So in order to give merchants and consumers an extra extra week to spend before Christmas, he bumped Thanksgiving up a week in order to have it be more of a shopping-based holiday. And a lot of people contribute this to be sort of the start of Black Friday.
Anybody going Black Friday shopping?
Hell no.
What? Really?
Gun stores overstocked for the election scares, so Black Friday and Christmas sales are fantastic times to get some guns.
Okay, maybe I'll go to a gun store, but I'm not trying to get my ass beat for a $10 deal on a TV.
Fair.
Yeah. I like Cyber Monday.
Okay.
I do. I mean, like, I don't know if I'll go this year, but I went a few times, and it's always fun. I don't even, like I'll buy something small, but it's mostly just, like, the excitement of being with a bunch of crazy people who go to get the deals, and it's like... But it's like, now we don't even need Black Friday for those deals, because we're going to make the best deals anyway. Wait,
but so you always see the crazy videos and everything on Black Friday. Have any of you guys actually seen a legitimate fight, like a brawl between two soccer moms fighting over
I saw that on Dexter's Laboratory. I don't know if you guys remember that episode where the moms are fighting over the rubber gloves. No, it's a classic episode. Obviously, I'm the only one who watched Dexter's Laboratory.
Kyle would have a specific term to use here.
Yeah, just say it. Just get it over with.
Human debris.
Yeah, I'm still the number one host of this podcast.
You're also the only host.
That's why.
If he's the Joe Scarborough, I'm the Mika Brzezinski of this.
You're my Mika.
Yeah.
That means that you're gonna have to divorce your spouse and marry me or date me. What?
Classic.
Hey, let's not curse.
Right,
that's a bleep.
Just edit it completely.
Okay.
Sorry.
So, Jeremy, why? So you are a Democrat.
Yes.
Why are you pro Second Amendment?
Well, I mean, I don't think, like, the term, like, Republican or Democrat should really denote a particular stance on, like, individual issues. I think, like, that term is a product of the result. You know, it's like a result of,
right.
You know...
I agree.
Once you add up all those stances. So I've just honestly felt like, you know, it's not just an ideological thing for me. Like, empirical evidence compels me to feel this way. You know, my personal experiences, the people that I've talked to, just like that really pushes me towards that position. Yeah.
Are you now? I assume you talk to more people who are more liberal than people I talk to, or people that maybe Andrew, Steve, and I talk to. Do people usually agree with you on this issue, or is it usually a contentious thing?
It's a bit of both, and I think a lot of it is because people don't do their research.
Right.
I think that's a problem that's like common to just about anything, but especially this one. because the gun control debate is very emotionally driven.
Right.
Like the policies, like you remember when I think the DNC, like the convention, dedicated one night towards talking about gun policies. None of the stuff they talked about actually addressed like the 6,000 plus Americans that were shot and killed with handguns. It was all centered on, mass shootings, emotionally driven rhetoric, talking about how like weapons of war shouldn't be on our streets. But statistically, assault weapons are used in less than 2% of gun crimes in the nation, right? So when you talk about that, it's very easy to understand when you actually speak to people in metropolitan areas that are actually stricken with gun violence, specifically with handguns. They will tell you that they feel left behind, and they're absolutely correct. Because, like when you talk about like policies that are actually going to target gun violence in cities and like prevent it, it doesn't sound sexy. What sounds sexy is, hey, let's take off automatic weapons, even though that's like factually incorrect, right? Like that's just not the case in America, but nobody gets riled up about it.
And I think, if you don't grow up around guns, if you don't have experience with them, they're scary, and they're scary to a lot of people. And, I think it's important to educate, especially in public schools. I think you should just have, in PE or whatever, just have a brief written test on gun safety, because they are out, like it or not, they are out there. And I think it's important to teach kids how to, should they come across one, how to handle one appropriately and safely.
And I think my experience with that when I was younger was actually through Cub Scouts. We were taught how to deal with this if we were to see it, that it's a tool in, et cetera, et cetera. And it was very nice to have that sort of a background. I mean, because I think, and we can kind of spear the discussion in this way, in the media, and whether it's films, video games, et cetera, we see the guns are violent. We see, any R-rated movie is going to have, and I know American cinemas are actually somewhat lenient with the amount of gun violence that they allow into even a PG-13 movie.
Right. And I think that's really interesting too, because like getting that dialogue about education is something that everybody supports. All the people that I've talked to in the Democrats Club, I've always insisted like it doesn't really matter, whether or not you like guns. I think it's important that you should know how to unload and safety check one.
Right. Yeah.
And all of them agree on that. And also, I think the thing about violence is like most of this stuff, for a lot of people, the only thing they know about guns is from Hollywood.
Yeah.
Right.
And Hollywood has really just kind of, and the media in general, they've turned violence into like a spectator sport, right?
And I think, and many directors even use it as like their aesthetic and their
Right.
Michael Bay.
I was going to say Tarantino.
I do want to mention, you mentioned the portrayal in video games and stuff like that. I mean, it's very, like I play GTA every now and then, and in GTA you can literally have a rocket launcher in your pocket. But even on that point, I mean, like, if you hold a gun, it's heavy. I mean, like it's a heavy thing. In the game, it looks like this light little thing. In movies too, where they're spraying around this. You don't ever think that there's weight to this object, and I know that, maybe that's not the most significant thing, but I think that there's a sense of realism lost in these portrayals, and that's why when people say this, it's like, that's just not real. And I think that when people think of gun violence, they think of people like spraying like Rambo, with
John Wick,
something like that, just like spraying ammo, and it's just not true.
One of the most, so many things about it are unrealistic, but one of the most unrealistic things, and I think from my understanding, this has a big way to do why they're currently illegal, is the use of suppressors in video games, movies. They do not. It's not the little, the little spit that you hear. It's much louder. I think the guy, whenever the NRA guy was talking about it, he said 32 decibels. I think it takes it down, which is, it's enough to,
because it's on a logarithmic scale.
It's to prevent permanent hearing damage, not to
be like James Bond.
Not to be James Bond and like assassin style.
And that's
especially
what
consider the fact that in a lot of European countries, suppressors are like encouraged. The use of suppressors are encouraged.
It's illegal to hunt without them.
And they're sold over the counter because they're considered like good etiquette.
Right, and when people, I forget who mentioned this, but it's just the use of guns that we see. I think everybody, you know, they're portrayed as all as this thing that's for attacking.
Right.
You know, it's this thing that, you know, you're gonna go into a store or a bank or someone's home and you're gonna, you know, hold the gun up and attack people.
Right.
But when people have guns, it's, you know, it's self-defense. I mean, you have the gun for self-defense. I know that there was this video that came out a few months ago, I think, or maybe it was a month or something like that, where there's these people home invading, and this woman comes out with a gun, and like she had security cameras, and like you can see her she didn't shoot anybody, and she looked like she didn't know how to use a gun.
I mean, there was that Everytown ad that was about like a woman and her child, and they were attacked by like her ex-husband or something like that.
Well, that was at the NRA event.
Yeah.
He violated his restraining order, and like my first thought was like, well, maybe she should have a gun, you know, like give her that fighting chance.
We always say, especially for women, it's the great equalizer.
Right.
That it doesn't matter what their physical stature is, that it can equalize them.
Yeah. Well, and that was an anti-gun ad. They were trying to prove, but you know, I had the same thought as Jeremy. It was like, why doesn't she have a shotgun?
Yeah.
Like, and because if the guy breaking in, you know, the guy was obviously insane. If he didn't have a gun, he would have a crowbar, an axe.
Right. And keep in mind, he would have been he was already violating a restraining order. And if you have an active restraining order, you can't legally have that gun. So I don't understand why piling on more legislation is supposed to stop that guy.
Right, and I want to ask you a question. Now when people talk about, you know, guns and stuff, people say, you know, if you have a gun, you can defend yourself from other, you know, I guess the bad people that have guns. And so I guess, you know, when I think of this, I think of it in terms of a greater political thing, in terms of, like, you know, when I think of nuclear proliferation, and whether people agree with nuclear proliferation. English is just my 8th language.
He's like Melania.
Right. And, you know, and because, like, you know, that argument against that is that, but if everybody has a nuke, then everybody has the capacity to destroy each other. Now, do you think that same logic upholds with the I guess, the idea that some people have of proliferation of guns or gun owners?
Not really.
No, not at all.
Because you have to realize, like, nation states operate within the state of nature and a state of chaos, right? So, like, you can talk about international law all you want, but there is no, like, international police.
At the end of the day, the UN peacekeepers are useless.
Right. Like, there's only so much they can do. They have their uses, but they can't, like, restrain a country.
And whether or not you follow international law is dependent on your interpretation. I mean, you can simply choose to ignore it. And I don't really think we can really look into a comparison of a weapon that is capable of killing thousands and millions, you know, and if not millions of people potentially, and even you know, to a handgun or anything like that. I think,
I just, you know, because I obviously don't think that way. I just wanted to ask your opinion on that, because I know that's what a lot of people say, and I know that, you know, I don't think it's a good argument personally, because I happen to agree with you guys. I just think that, you know, there's often these counter arguments that people will pose where it's like, but then everybody's going to be shooting each other in the streets. And and that's just simply not the case.
You know, we forget about states that have constitutional carry, like, I think Vermont has it.
Vermont, West Virginia,
I think
just
Maine has
recently passed
constitutional
it.
carry over 21.
I think, I could be wrong, don't quote me on this, but I think now it's up to 10 states.
Okay.
I could be mistaken. Actually, I'm gonna look that up.
And I think because you mentioned Vermont, I think it's actually interesting that at one point in time, Bernie Sanders was sort of endorsed by the NRA because he understood that a state like Vermont is so different than a place across the nation, that it's rural, the cultures are different, the way that they treat guns are much different. And I think that I actually had more in common with Bernie Sanders on guns than I did with Secretary Clinton throughout the primary.
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing, we got to keep in mind, like, people who hold concealed carry permits are literally the most law-abiding demographic in America. And it makes sense, because they have to pass a background check to have that permit. They have to pass a background check to have that gun. You know, there's all these different steps that they have to take, and as a result, you have the most law-abiding demographic in the United States, even more so than police officers.
And you know, when people talk about concealed carry and maybe a criminal having it, you know, the thing is, if someone's usually going to commit a criminal act with a gun and they're hiding it, you're probably going to be able to see the gun on their waistband or somewhere on them, because I mean,
and they're not going to get a concealed carry.
Right. And,
absolutely.
I mean, if you are trying to break the law, you're not going to follow the law to break the law. Like, that's just not what you're going to do.
Exactly.
And I think that people, overthink all of this stuff. Like they're like, but we gotta beat them at this 8D chess. It's like no, it's pretty one dimensional in this aspect.
Just back to the constitutional carry real quick. Yes, there are 11 states with constitutional carry currently, and 22 states planning to introduce constitutional carry into their legislature, including Pennsylvania. So get hyped for that.
I actually have mixed opinions about that. I'll be honest with you.
What's that?
I understand where you're coming from. But I think that it starts with education.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to educate especially young children, because there are plenty of people that my mom included, that I don't trust myself with a gun. I'm not gonna mess around with it. And they're intelligent enough to realize that they don't know enough about it to do it. So I think it's very important to get that education process started as soon as possible.
And you mentioned you mentioned your parent, and I know that and the children, and I know that there's this whole appeal about like when there's a child that fatally kills himself with a gun or kills a friend with a gun. Obviously that's awful, but I always say, but this is upon the responsibility of the gun owner who is being irresponsible, and they should be punished. I mean, I think, and you mentioned the emotional appeal at the DNC. Obviously these things are terrible. I mean, you can point to any mass shooting, anybody dying from gun violence in general, and say this is terrible. But we can't just change legislation because something bad happens once. I mean, that's my whole idea on the Patriot Act, and another thing. And I know right after the Orlando shooting, which was obviously terrible, I know that they were saying, no fly, no buy and stuff like that. And I was like, but this is a violation of their rights. This is a violation of due process. And that was funny.
Probably one of the most blatant violations.
And it was funny to me because I was watching one of the hearings for Brian Pagliano, one of Hillary Clinton's aides that helped her with the email server. And he had immunity given to him and then something else. And he said, and Jim Cummings, the congressman, he said something like, "This is a violation of our due process, blah blah blah." And I was like, "You are literally the people who wanted to suspend due process for the no-fly list." So
I think there is an arrogance that because I remember when there was an interview, man, I forgot like which channel and which person was being interviewed, but it was a politician. I think it was a representative, and he was saying that people shouldn't have guns and all that, and basically the interviewer was like, well, why don't we start with your bodyguards, right? And he was like, well, we're different.
And, no, I saw that. He said, well, we deserve it,
right? And I'm like, do these people really think that they have a greater right to live than the average everyday citizen?
I think a lot of them forget they work for us.
Right.
And I think, I don't want to make this too closely related to the election, but I think that was a big part of the election this year with Bernie and with Trump, and just this anti-establishment feel where it was, they work for us. Let's get people who are working for us. And I know you mentioned the DNC and the Democratic Party, and it's this whole idea that there are these elites now, and we want the people who are going to fight that. And obviously that was the Trump appeal, and that was the Bernie appeal. Whether or not you agree with the policy, that is the motivating factor behind those things. And I don't want to get too much off this topic, but I think it's important to just mention that that is when people speak like that, that's why things what happened in this election happened.
And I think it's rampant on all sides.
Right. Oh, I wouldn't even point to one side of the aisle, because I think that both sides of the aisle are responsible for it, and I'm disappointed that my own party does it, and I'm disappointed that Democrats do it, because I think people deserve better than that.
Right.
You would not have this many Americans who feel left behind if it weren't on both sides of the aisle.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
I've heard that from Bernie people, and I've heard that from Trump people.
Absolutely.
That they feel left behind by both parties.
Absolutely.
And I think ultimately Trump was able to sway voters, and I think we spoke about this, who maybe would have gone for Bernie, and I think they did go for Bernie in the primary, and they probably some of them probably have voted for Obama twice, but because they felt left behind, Trump was able to speak with them and connect with them.
That happened at the Trump table. There were a couple people.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, back to guns.
Yeah, no, I was gonna let you finish, but so on the topic of people feeling left behind, obviously there are organizations that represent the interests of the people, and the most prominent of which is the NRA. So I
don't think so.
Really, when it's in terms of gun rights,
like I'm I'm an NRA member, but like I wouldn't readily say that the NRA takes care of the people.
So you want? I mean, in terms of just protecting Second Amendment rights, you don't think that they are?
Here's my stance.
Right.
I throw my lot in with the NRA because I think they're my best shot overall. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't go so far as to say that they have my best interests in mind.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the NRA is a bunch of lobbyists.
Yeah, and I think they're more closely associated with, like, they're more close with gun manufacturers than gun owners, in my opinion.
I'm an NRA member as well, and I think one of the reasons that I actually don't own a firearm at the current moment, but one of the reasons that persuaded me to join was because of how they want firearm education to be at a more prevalent level than it is now. So I think they've been villainized a bit. So I think
that's fair.
I want to see their image to get changed a little bit. But I think certainly, I mean, they can be a huge donor to not even just Republicans. I know they endorsed a Democrat in the Missouri Senate race, governor race. But I think they do have the reputation of even being sort of like a slimy organization because of their lobbying ties and just the amount of money that they can give out.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of the role of the NRA, I know that you have your answer that they teach soldiers how to shoot properly.
That was their foundation.
Right.
It was after the Civil War, actually. The Southerners outshot the Northerners by a huge ratio. They were just better shots. And after that, the United States government decided we need to teach our guys how to shoot. And that's how they got their start.
Is that just because the South is better than the North, Jeremy? Since you're from there, could you vouch for this?
I think it's because the South had people there would probably be more familiar with marksmanship because of hunting ties and all that. I think that stays true today.
Right. I think that's actually a question I wanted to ask Jeremy earlier, but we didn't get to. Do you feel that because you're a Democrat from Texas, especially at a northern university, some would say even a progressive university, do you feel that your values are different than the people in the college Democrats, and how so?
Or just other liberals on campus?
Yeah, I think just...
Well, he's an officer in the club. So that's kind of why I asked that.
I'm just going to curl up in a bar. You can.
I think because I'm actually... There's like an
actual,
surprising number of Democrats in the club that are pro-Second Amendment. And overwhelmingly so, they're the ones that have prior experience and exposure with firearms. Not even just like in like a defensive shoot kind of thing, but in a hunting role.
Yeah.
And you notice a trend that's like the ones who are from cities or suburban areas and don't have experience with firearms tend to view them very unfavorably, and it's clouded by a lot of that emotionally driven rhetoric or things they see on Hollywood.
There's recently there are so many people that they don't even give it a thought. It's like I'm not shooting a gun. But there was recently I saw a video on Facebook. In Hollywood LA. They took out a bunch of extreme anti-gun people. They took them to a firing range, and there was a surprising number of them who's like, I understand why people like this. It didn't necessarily change their mind, but they said I have more of an understanding of the other side now, and I think that's important to keep an open mind. And while you may not necessarily agree with the other side, you have to. You have to understand where they're coming from.
Right.
And there was that video I remember. It was the BuzzFeed reporter shooting the AR-15?
Oh my god.
Oh
so
my
god.
And PTSD.
From and then there was the video of the little girl shooting the AR-15, and she was like, "That was cool." Like,
I absolutely hated that article, especially because he cheapens, the suffering of veterans that have PTSD.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad that he was, universally condemned for that article.
Right. What do you have something to say?
Oh no, there was another one. The guy, this just gun guy, random. He would going on Facebook, and he shot it off of his nose. And he was shooting an AR-15 just off of his nose.
You can shoot it off your nuts. No problem.
Wow. I didn't know this. I've actually never shot a gun.
Woo,
I just love the Second Amendment. And actually, on that topic, history of the Second Amendment. Now, obviously, if you want to be informed on the Second Amendment, do not watch Alex Jones talk to Piers Morgan about the Second Amendment. You don't
1776.
1776 happened again. It's a globalist agenda.
You need to go back to Britain, Piers.
That is, I mean, like,
we'll put it in the link dump.
That's, I mean, absolutely. That is
just do yourself a favor. Take the 13 minutes.
It's like a 13, 14 minute.
And just watch it. You will not regret doing it.
It's probably the peak of human civilization. And it's
if
like,
that's the peak, what are we?
it's like we evolved into our current current form, and then we connected the globe with all this discovery. Thanksgiving, and then
This is the human body.
we fought World War II. We beat fascism. We did all this great stuff, America, and then Alex Jones goes in on Piers Morgan, and Piers Morgan goes, "Are you done?"
I think that's my favorite part of the video when he asks him that. Like, just this somewhat dainty, like, fragile British man with his
what do you
legs crossed.
say?
And he's just like, "Are you
what
done?"
could you even say?
I know, there's nothing more that he could do.
Piers, you don't come over here and try to take our guns like you used to. It's like, I mean, this guy, this is a married man.
That's the only time that I think I've felt sympathetic for Piers, like, ever.
Well, Piers also...
he's just getting berated by Alex Jones.
I mean, actually, one of the only times I ever liked Piers Morgan, too, was when when I found out that he's a Trump supporter, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah,
because it's Piers Morgan. Like...
he had a very interesting relationship with Trump, and I think he's a fame junkie. I really don't.
Yeah.
I mean that. I really don't think that he had
Absolutely.
any reason to support Mr. Trump otherwise. I think that he wanted to have the notoriety of supporting. I mean, he was well regarded as not just a leftist. I mean, not just a liberal here, but in England, he was widely utilized as sort of like. Like in the U.S., we had Crossfire, where a liberal would debate a conservative on CNN. On sort of the British equivalent, he was always the liberal side, the left of center side. And it's just very disingenuous, I think, for him to come out and support Trump.
What would the English version of Crossfire be called? Like, I want to think of like an English way to phrase that. Would it be like
morning tea?
There's fire at the cross. Like I don't know. I just want to do accents. I'm very talented. No, we're not scrapping it. I do excellent imitations.
I vote for the scrap.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jeremy, actually, on the topic of scraps, I hear that you are a gun maker yourself.
I am. I've made 2 muzzle loaders. One is a Kentucky rifle kind of muzzle loader. The other is like a smaller one. It's 32 cal. It's for squirrels. Mm-hmm. And then I've made a 1911 right here.
The year 1911? Oh, God. I mean, I don't know anything about guns. I'm great. Okay, so let's do a very smooth transition now to the history of the Second Amendment. Obviously, I'm the #1 host on the Pitt Mavericast, so in terms of the Second Amendment, does anybody want to read the Second Amendment, or do you want me to?
I have it memorized.
Do you actually have it memorized?
Yeah, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Hey.
I think, just especially shall not be infringed, I think is the clearest language in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And a document that
is pretty vague.
It has been interpreted different ways for its entire existence. It's debated about literally every day. I think that is by far the clearest language.
I always make fun of Kyle, because he always goes on about the Oxford comma. But the comma in that clause is the most important part. That is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm. If either you guys have it
up, yeah.
It is.
It's
yeah.
right,
The right of the a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Well, arms, comma, shall not be infringed.
Yes, I mean, if you take away one of those commas, it completely changes the meaning.
And
when the founders were writing the Constitution, they did debate every little thing. The last change they did make, they took out a comma.
Yeah.
That was it was a very meticulously thought out document.
I can remember in my high school AP English class, one of the things we looked at was different versions of the Declaration of Independence and how it had changed over time. And those were just a couple of drafts that we've seen. So I can't even imagine for something like the Constitution, every single word, every single piece, every single punctuation, every single sentence had to be fought over, scoured over, debated, and I think it's incredible.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you said, shall not be infringed. I mean, is that not the most clear language? I mean,
We already
like,
said that.
I know. I'm just rephrasing. I'm just doing.
Yeah, that's not a rephrase.
You said what I said word for word.
I'm gonna cite my source right now, Andrew Zencraft, 2016. Now, in terms of the purpose of the Second Amendment, I think this is often debated, at least, or people don't like to hear what the purpose is.
I think you need like a good examination into what a well-regulated militia means. And
that is often cited by anti-gun people is the well-regulated part.
And here's the thing: a lot of them say, well, a well-regulated militia is probably like a government-run thing, like the National Guard. But you already have precedents like I think Anglum v. Carey, where they said like the National Guard is not a militia; it is the military.
Yeah,
and U.S. Codex
Yeah,
specifically lays out, you don't have to be in like on a roster of some government organization to be in a militia.
Because the militia is made up of the people. It's not a organized government force. That's what the Minutemen were. They were not originally, but before, or they were not a government force. They were just people trying to defend their homes.
Right.
Yeah. And now Steve, you have written here "protect against tyranny," and this is, I know I've seen the Ben Shapiro talk with Pierce Morgan on the Second Amendment, and
what a breath of fresh air.
I know, right? and when in that interview, Ben Shapiro talks about how it is the purpose of the Second Amendment is so that to protect ourselves against possible government tyranny.
Yes.
And the argument I've heard a few arguments, and I just want to list them out right here, and then we can kind of go over them. Now, I've heard, well, if the government has drones, then what's the point of having guns? Because you're dead anyway. I've heard from, I think it was, who's the guy who does the Daily Show now?
Trevor Noah.
The most unfunny man in America. Really, he's South African. Yeah. He's actually he's actually won awards for being the least funny person on earth. It's crazy. He said the Second Amendment only talks about muskets, not AR-15s. So
I have an issue with that.
Okay, yeah. Go on. I want to hear this.
So here's the thing. Well, actually, I want to revisit the well-regulated militia thing first. When people think about well-regulated, they apply their modern definition of regulation. But that's not what it means when you actually go back and study the nomenclature and the evolution of that word. Well-regulated at that time meant well-functioning. Like a well-regulated machine is a machine that runs well, So it has nothing to do with government regulation. And also on the issue of they were talking about muskets and such. We've already established multiple times that the Second Amendment extends to things that weren't in existence at the time. I think it was Caetano v. Massachusetts, where they were trying to, I think Massachusetts was trying to restrict the ability for people to carry stun guns, and the Supreme Court unanimously rejected that and said, no, the Second Amendment applies to things that were not in existence at the time.
And if you can make that argument that, it applies only to muskets, which isn't the case. There were, repeating rifles that were created before the Second Amendment was written. But why should Twitter and Facebook, why should that apply to the first?
Right.
Because if you use the same train of thought, then the Founding Fathers couldn't possibly understand the impact that social media would have.
Right.
Therefore, restrictions on your speech online is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, it's like you can't yell fire in a crowded building. It's like that. Things evolve over time, and I think to say that the Second Amendment is only talking about muskets, it's just such a crude and undeveloped argument.
It's also a complete. It's just wrong.
Yeah,
it's
wrong.
Thomas Jefferson. The weapons that Thomas Jefferson outfitted Lewis and Clark with was the Giardoni air rifle. It was a repeating. It was a semi-automatic rifle.
And that's what I wanted to talk about. I mean, the Pennsylvania long rifle would have been the most technologically advanced weapon that many people would have seen, and it was precise. easily movable. I mean, that was the military grade technology at the time.
And you can actually find like documents written at that time talking about how to form a militia. And they specifically mentioned, like, look, we need to train a certain way. We need to have this kind of equipment in which they maximize their firepower, maximize their effectiveness.
And going back to Sam's point about tyranny, tyranny comes in all forms. It's not necessarily always fighting against the government,
right?
But if one person had or only a couple people had a gun in the crowd at San Bernardino. Or even in Garland, Texas, they were having a Draw Muhammad contest, and all of a sudden the terrorists roll up, get out of, and then all of a sudden they haven't been back to Texas.
Yeah, like the officers killed them.
Yeah.
Right, and on that point where you made about the Draw Muhammad thing, like obviously, like I personally don't agree. I think that was rude of them to do.
Yeah,
right.
It's rude.
But then again, and obviously, like, but then again, they're exercising their free speech, and for people to kill over free speech, obviously they're terrorists.
Yeah, like,
but the idea that you can't, but the idea that if that situation, God forbid, ever came up, and people didn't have anything to defend themselves against these people attacking them for their freedom of speech. I mean, we see it on our own campus where people are attacked for exercising their right to free speech.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that we need guns on a Pitt campus, because I'm not saying that. But I'm saying,
I'm totally for campus carry.
That's actually a perfect segue, because I wanted to talk about campus carry tonight.
Just end it on this note.
Oh, yeah.
If someone is burning the U.S. flag, okay, they have a right to do so.
Absolutely.
If someone comes up with a gun and tries to shoot the dude burning the flag, I will get my gun. Yeah. Like, hands down.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
I like the Voltaire. I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of funny that we have these protesters saying "F the police" and the police are defending them. So
I did appreciate the 1,000-man march last night, where like the organizers specifically said like thank you to the Pitt police. Thank you Pittsburgh police for cornering that. So
especially because I think, really especially the night after the election, there were a few very violent protesters who chanted things about the police.
The organizers of the march last night specifically made this where they addressed the issue where like the events that occurred the night of the election are like not they're not acceptable,
especially when police are the ones blocking traffic. They're the ones making sure that a car doesn't come and plow through the protesters, that they're protecting their right to do it.
I just really think the march last night was really well done.
That's a great gesture to the place.
And I know that you want to talk about campus carry, which I obviously am so talented and segued into. So
unknowingly, like you're like, not that I want to do that.
I do want to segue because I'm talented. Andrew, you want to take on this campus carry topic right now?
I can sort of just introduce it and see where we go. I think it's definitely. I mean, obviously, some states it's happening quicker than others, but I think a lecture hall, I think, is Texas we can talk about. But I think we always hear the movie theater or the concert example, to where if somebody were to plan a mass shooting, etc., that you would want somebody in there with the proper training, with the protection. And I think a campus lecture hall is actually a good version of that, to where an average police response time is 10 minutes. That something horrible could happen. And I think that's, even though I don't like using an emotional argument like that, I think it's a legitimate case and a legitimate worry. Especially, Virginia Tech, etc.
No, and I think that private universities, obviously, have private property. You have the right to say, we don't want guns here. But public universities are, they are part of the country. They are part of the shall not be infringed. And I think if a student feels that they would like to defend themselves or have that right, should something horrible happen, I think they should have that right.
I think you can just very easily sum it up with like this hypothetical. If in the event of a mass shooting you were hunkered down, locked down in your room with your classmates, would you feel more comfortable if you knew that your friend sitting right next to you had a permit to carry, passed a test for it, passed a background check for that permit, passed a background check for that weapon, and trained to know how to use it?
Yeah.
I can't remember which one it was. I believe it was one of the Virginia Tech shootings where they actually had people who had their weapons in their cars, and they pinned down the sniper while the police stormed the building.
That was UT Austin.
Oh, UT Austin.
Back in like the 60s or 70s.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's a perfect example of good people stopping a bad a bad man.
I think one of the police snipers had a student serve as a spotter during the shoot. So yeah.
And then can you talk? I mean, do you know enough about UT Austin's policies that you could bring it up, or?
So I think it was just very recently that they said campus carry is okay. Mm-hmm. I think there was a protest about it where
Cocks
they were
not Glocks.
Cocks not Glocks, and I think the premise of that was kind of bastardized, where people were saying why can you have
why can you have a penis? But
well, I think
it was
the original protesters were saying it's absurd to allow campus carry and at the same time have these archaic laws regarding sex toys. And I honestly think that's a fair argument because have both.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with sex. I don't have a problem with sex toys.
You want to go all out
locker room.
Yeah, if you have if you have more than Home Depot, have at it. I think that's great. I think it's cool. But,
invite me over sometime.
Yeah, and here's the thing, absolutely, I think the UT system should change their policy regarding things like sex toys. I think it's just such an outdated way of thinking of it's kink shaming is what it is.
Right.
I just think that universities should not be stepping in to regulate what students do in their private lives.
Oh, no, absolutely.
So,
the university is there to educate.
Yeah.
They're not there to regulate.
Yeah. So, honestly,
fancy.
have both. Go at it. Cocks and Glocks.
The Mavericast. Steve, you have here stricter gun laws equals higher crime rates. I know that Jeremy. I've seen your work, your PowerPoint, and the thing you once wrote about the crime statistics and guns and stuff like that. Do you want to touch on this about higher crime rates and stricter gun laws? And I know that you're both knowledgeable on this. So
okay,
take this away.
Basically, I wouldn't say that stricter gun laws necessarily equals higher crime. It's a very.
I was writing notes.
Right. There is, you can't make that case. There's that causation, not correlation kind of thing. But I will say that, we know this for a fact, that stricter gun laws does not necessarily equal less crime, and we have fantastic examples.
I think in 1993, England banned handguns.
Yeah.
Was it 93 or 97?
I know
either
it was
way.
In the 90s.
Yeah. But they had a year where things kind of went down a little, and then all of a sudden, 2 years later, huge spike.
Yeah.
The gun crime went down because they took all but the violent crime skyrocketed.
Yeah, I think
and
their violent crime
people
rate
were largely less safe.
Yeah.
Than after the ban than beforehand.
Yeah, I think their violent crime rate is double in the United States.
And it's the same thing in, it doesn't matter where you look. If you want to look in the United States, Chicago, Detroit, D.C.
Ooh, yeah.
If you want to look at Australia.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And here's the thing,
it's all over the world.
If you look at some of their legislation, it really goes back to the emotionally driven aspect. I think so. The UK recently banned what's called zombie knives. Zombie knives are basically knives that have fancy doodads and doobers and switches on them. That's it. And they ban them because they think it's more deadly. And it's the same thing with assault weapons.
Yeah, the cosmetics.
Yeah.
Changing the cosmetics of the gun is not going to reduce the lethality or the crime rate.
Right. If you said right now, hey, an assault weapons the 1994 assault weapons ban is back, effective tomorrow, my first response is, well, I can still buy an AR-15.
Yeah.
Andrew, you have something?
I was going to think, I mean, because Australia obviously had a different program to where they did mass buybacks. I know at one point in time... Oh, yeah. And I know at one point in time, the Clintons briefly suggested they would take a look at them, but I think that they have I haven't heard anything like that since. But I think, because one thing that we kept seeing with buyback programs is people would take older guns or malfunctioning guns and just take the cash for them.
Yeah. Statistically, buybacks are horrible. Even, like, gun control advocates have said buybacks are ineffective.
But didn't Massachusetts try to do it, and it failed miserably? They only got like a couple hundred in their buyback program.
You can go to Costco, spend $20 on like plywood and pipe, and then turn that in. Mm-hmm. Like that's happened before.
You know the thing. You know, in terms of the Australia ban and stuff like that. You know, I know that the WikiLeaks thing came out about Hillary and the gun ban or the executive order on gun action, and I kind of skimmed it. I'm a great journalist. But that was one of the reasons.
Best and brightest here.
Right. That was one of the reasons that pushed me not. Yeah, I wasn't a supporter of any, but that's what made me scared. Because, you know, it's that idea that she can just, you know, the president has this power to take away our rights. You know, I'm not a gun owner, but I care a lot about people's rights. You know, whether it's the first or the second. It's that idea that, you know, we can take away your right because... You know, this person now has this accumulated power, and I think that was just so wrong. And you know, I think you know, in terms of people just voting,
right?
You know, that's gonna force people to vote the other way.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, like I'm a Democrat, like I'm okay with big government,
right?
But I think that we need to have a serious discussion about how much power that the executive branch ought to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I one of the best, you know, little, I don't even know what to call it, sayings, I guess, is the second guarantees the first. You know, it's without the second, it'd be very easy to lose the first, you know, because there's no way to protect yourself.
Well, right, and I think it goes back to this idea. I know that we've spoken to Kyle, who was on the last episode, about this just in private, but, you know, government has the threat of force behind it, right? So it's you are compelled by gun to do things, by government, in theory. Obviously, like, I don't think the U.S. government's going to come to me and put a gun to my head and do something.
I mean,
but I think
basically,
as political science students, I mean, when we look at what a state is, they have to have a monopoly of force in a given area, and so you're absolutely correct.
And I think people having the guns or having weapons equalizes that power in some way. So that, you know, people can say, you know, obviously not have an armed revolution, but, you know, there's force behind us, I guess. You know, it's that constant relationship between the people. You're right. It's that constant relation between the people and the government, and the idea that, you know, we can hold you accountable in our own ways.
Right.
Yeah. Or you know, it's this whole
Thomas Jefferson is my personal favorite founding father. And he has a couple really great quotes. You know, the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. What was it? A little rebellion now and again is a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, he has a thousand. You know, Thomas Jefferson was a very strong advocate for.
I mean, for me, it's like, you know,
would have been
touching on that aspect of tyranny. Like you know, and this is my guarantee to like any of my friends, especially like the ones that I've talk to post-election, especially ones that are in the LGBTQ plus community. I've said, like, if someone tries to take you away because of who you are, I will get my gun.
Absolutely. You know, it does not. You know, I don't care. You know, gay rights. It's not my issue. I don't really care one way or the other.
Okay.
You know, I think that I believe in religious liberty. I also believe that they should be able to get married to whoever they want. But if there was ever an instance where the government was coming around collecting people because of their sexual orientation, because of their religion, because of wherever, you get behind me.
Yeah, like I will get my gun.
Right. And again, like you said, the second defends the first.
Yeah.
You know, that's that same idea. You know, again, you know, and I think this is the part where people maybe misconceptualize some of the parts of the right, and I think it's partially due to the right not presenting itself the right way. But, you know, if you disagree with someone, you know, we still respect their right. You know, and I'm very libertarian on a lot of issues where it's like, you know, I may not agree with your way of life, or I'm not going to participate in your way of life, but you can live that way.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I hate that there's people who may feel unsafe being who they are. Mm-hmm. And I know that I don't know if it was Milo or just Breitbart in general. There was an article about gay people and guns, and Milo. I think that's probably Milo, because he said, why wouldn't gay people be supportive of gun rights, because they could defend themselves against someone trying to hurt them, because obviously they're horrible people who want to hurt gay people. And I think it was Milo. I'm not too sure. I'll put it in the link up if I can find it. But I know that there was this idea, people should defend themselves, and obviously there's many ways. But
one of my favorite shirts that I've ever seen is the rainbow Uzi, and it says "We shoot back."
Yeah. I mean, like, personally, I think Breitbart's kind of a cesspool of journalism, but
we just spoke about that last night, actually.
I think for some reason we talk about this every episode about the demise of Breitbart. Right? We somehow work it in every episode.
But I was thinking, like, on the issue of people being armed to protect themselves, I think if this is just like, I'm being a shill right now. I'm just being a total shill. But if you want to be serious about, like, helping the LGBTQ plus community and, like, educating them about firearms and, like, defending themselves, Pink Pistols is a fantastic organization, and their motto is something like, armed gays don't get bashed. Something along the lines of that. I'm probably paraphrasing, but they're fantastic. I've shot with a lot of people, and I've shot with members of Pink Pistols, and by far they're my favorite people to work with.
I'll have to look into them. I haven't heard of them before.
Yeah, they're fantastic. There's a chapter here in Pittsburgh.
Oh, really?
And I was going to say, just because we're talking about sort of the issues facing LGBT Americans, and I think that Trump at the convention, when he said that he wants to protect them from what he called a hateful foreign ideology, and I think it was refreshing to hear, whether you agree with the latter part of the sentence or not, just to hear a Republican, let alone a nominee of the Republican Party, saying that he's going to protect these Americans.
I think he has to do more to reassure them, though, especially with his selection of Mike Pence,
right,
as his running mate.
Yeah, I think the selection of Mike Pence, though, that was more to relieve conservative fears, because their conservatives were afraid he is a liberal, he is not a conservative.
Yeah.
And so I think his selection of Mike Pence was to try and alleviate their concerns.
And I can remember Trump saying at one point that it was like facing two candidates, because he in the early summer he had Hillary to his left, and then he had many, whether they be conservatives or whether they be more establishment GOP figures, who disagreed with him on the right. And I think that Pence went a long way to helping him shore up many people who were suspicious.
That might be true, but I still think if he wanted to choose like an establishment dude as his running mate, there were better selections, because like Pence is best.
No, I wouldn't call Pence. I would say that he was a conservative choice, not necessarily an establishment.
A conservative choice.
I would just, if I was Trump, my pick, given the attacks coming at me, racist, I would pick Susana Martinez.
Yeah, and here's the thing, because like Pence is best known for being like a social conservative, to the point where I personally think it's like some of his stances are absolutely disgusting.
Right.
So I just think there could have been better choices made, a lot better.
Mm-hmm. I think the problem was not enough people were willing to be his VP at that time, because I think they almost knew that they were walking into a suicide mission, because it didn't look promising even remotely, and his other options were Newt, many problems. We'll need a separate podcast to talk about Newt.
I think we had a whole part about Newt yesterday, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of Newt love last night.
Well, since we're pre-recording, yeah.
Right.
What did we can say yesterday? But Rudy, another, lots of problems. Christie, sorry Sam, lots of problems. So I think at the end of the day, I think Pence, if I were in Trump's shoes, which obviously I wasn't, but I think I would have gone with Pence.
I don't know. I mean, I obviously don't know like the whole roster of people that were,
because I know many, like Nikki Haley, Bob Corker. I don't know about Martinez, but many turned down even being considered.
Actually, on the topic of Trump, what's your opinion on Trump's gun plan?
Ooh,
awesome. I mean, huge step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Now he did support the no fly, no buy.
See, that's
come
on, man.
Right.
Well, awesome, but not perfect. He supports getting rid of gun-free zones on military bases. He supports legalization of suppressors. He supports nationalized concealed carry.
Reciprocity.
Which I'm a huge advocate for.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you look at like the reforms that he wants to make to the Knicks database, I think that really takes things in the right direction, because I really truly believe that the Knicks system needs more support. You know, like there's only so much you can do with laws, and really the results start to run out if you don't enforce them or give people the resources to carry it out effectively. And I think Knicks right now is just not. Like there's so many places to improve, especially the emphasis on working together with the healthcare industry to make sure mental health, healthcare for people with mental health, is streamlined with the Knicks database. I think that's absolutely a step in the right direction.
Anything else you guys want to cover today, or?
No, I think we had a pretty good discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. With that, I do want to talk about a thing that we're going to be doing in the next few weeks. So just as an announcement, so this is pre-recorded for Thanksgiving because we'll be home with our families. So the next two podcasts over the next 2 weeks, so that will be current with the news. Covering news, covering just topics going on. The next 3 weeks, when we're over winter break, will be pre-recorded podcasts that topic based. So we will be talking about so we're gonna be reading a book over winter break, all of us who are gonna be back after winter break, and so right now we're thinking of Andrew Klavan's new book, which is
a great good thing.
A secular Jew comes to faith in Christ. If anybody has any suggestions, tweet at me at Sam Bleifer or at the Pitt Maverick,
at Pizza Party Andy,
at any of us.
My Twitter is Kung Pao Wang.
I'll link you. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, we would love to hear any book recommendations, but I think this Andrew Klavan's new book is really what we're leaning towards.
And thank you to Jeremy and Steve for coming on today, and Andy, of course, as always. And happy Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much turkey.
Go Steelers.
Go Steelers.